Question 1. The audit findings indicate that while the mine has documented hazard communication and emergency response plans, there is a lack of consistent evidence that all miners, including recently hired contractors, fully understand the specific hazards associated with their work areas and the procedures to follow during an emergency evacuation. The audit also noted that some of the training records for hazard communication appear incomplete. Given the requirements of the Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977, Mine Act, and MSHA regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the mine operator? Option A. Conduct a thorough review and update of the mine's hazard communication program and emergency response plan to ensure they meet or exceed MSHA requirements and any applicable state mining laws, followed by targeted retraining for all personnel, with a focus on verifying comprehension and ensuring all training records are accurate and complete. Option B. Focus solely on rectifying the incomplete training records by backdating entries where possible, and inform MSHA that the plans are in place and that a review is underway to address any minor discrepancies. Option C. Immediately update all training materials and conduct a single, comprehensive retraining session for all personnel, focusing on the most critical aspects of hazard communication and emergency procedures, and ensure all records are updated to reflect this session. Option D. Rely on the existing documented plans and conduct a brief refresher training session for supervisors, assuming they will then communicate the necessary information to their crews and update the training records to reflect the supervisor's attendance. Correct answer is C. Immediately update all training materials and conduct a single, comprehensive retraining session for all personnel, focusing on the most critical aspects of hazard communication and emergency procedures, and ensure all records are updated to reflect this session. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a mine operator to navigate the complex interplay between federal and state mining laws, specifically concerning hazard communication and emergency preparedness, while facing potential enforcement actions. The operator must demonstrate a thorough understanding of the Mine Act, MSHA regulations, particularly 30 CFR Part 48 and Part 50, and any applicable state-specific requirements that may be more stringent than federal mandates. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all employees, including contractors, are adequately trained on the hazards present in their specific work areas, and that emergency procedures are not only documented, but also effectively communicated and practiced. The potential for significant penalties and the ethical obligation to protect miner safety necessitate a precise and compliant response. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review and update of the mine's hazard communication program and emergency response plan, ensuring alignment with both MSHA requirements and any more stringent state regulations. This includes verifying that training records are accurate and complete, that material safety data sheets, MSDS, or safety data sheets, SDS, are readily accessible and understood by all affected miners, and that emergency drills are conducted regularly and documented. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the audit findings by proactively rectifying potential deficiencies in hazard communication and emergency preparedness, thereby demonstrating a commitment to compliance with the Mine Act, MSHA regulations, and relevant state laws. It prioritizes miner safety by ensuring they are informed about hazards and prepared for emergencies, fulfilling the operator's legal and ethical responsibilities. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings as minor or to only address the most obvious discrepancies without a thorough review. This failure to conduct a comprehensive assessment risks overlooking other critical compliance gaps, leaving the mine vulnerable to future citations and penalties. It also demonstrates a lack of commitment to proactive safety management, potentially endangering miners. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on MSHA regulations and ignore any specific state mining laws or regulations that might impose additional requirements for hazard communication or emergency response plans. State laws can often be more stringent than federal ones, and failure to comply with them constitutes a violation of those specific statutes, leading to separate enforcement actions and penalties. A third incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes, such as simply updating the written plans without ensuring that the training is effective and that miners understand the information. The legal and ethical requirement is not just to have plans and training materials, but for those materials to be understood and for the training to be effective in preparing miners for real-world hazards and emergencies. This approach fails to meet the spirit and intent of the regulations, which is to ensure miner safety through effective communication and preparedness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of all applicable federal and state mining laws and regulations. Upon receiving audit findings, a systematic approach should be taken to investigate each finding, identifying the specific regulatory requirements that may have been violated. This involves consulting the Mine Act, relevant MSHA regulations, e.g., 30 CFR Parts 48, 50, 70, 90, and any applicable state mining laws. The operator should then conduct a root cause analysis to understand why the deficiency occurred. Based on this analysis, a corrective action plan should be developed that not only addresses the immediate findings, but also strengthens overall compliance systems. This plan should be implemented, and its effectiveness should be monitored and documented. Regular training, clear communication, and a proactive safety culture are essential to prevent future occurrences and ensure the well-being of all miners. Question 2. Operational review demonstrates that a significant quantity of newly arrived combustible materials, including oily rags and untreated lumber, are being temporarily stored in an underground mine area adjacent to active ventilation controls, pending their eventual transport to designated storage locations. The mine's standard operating procedure for material storage is currently being bypassed due to perceived operational urgency. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the mine safety professional? Option A. Immediately direct the relocation of the combustible materials to a designated, properly ventilated, and segregated storage area, and initiate a review of the circumstances leading to the deviation from standard operating procedures. Option B. Ensure that fire extinguishers are readily accessible in the immediate vicinity of the stored materials, and instruct personnel to monitor the area visually for any signs of smoke or heat. Option C. Post warning signs indicating the presence of combustible materials and instruct personnel to avoid ignition sources in the vicinity, deferring relocation until the operational urgency has subsided. Option D. Allow the materials to remain in the temporary location, provided that personnel conduct hourly visual inspections and document the rationale for the deviation in the daily mine log. The correct answer is A. Immediately direct the relocation of the combustible materials to a designated, properly ventilated, and segregated storage area, and initiate a review of the circumstances leading to the deviation from standard operating procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a mine safety professional to balance immediate operational needs with long-term fire prevention compliance under the U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA regulations. The challenge lies in the potential for a seemingly minor deviation from standard procedure to escalate into a significant safety hazard, particularly concerning spontaneous combustion in stored materials. Careful judgment is required to assess the risk accurately and implement appropriate controls without unduly disrupting operations. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic risk assessment of the stored materials, considering their inherent properties and the environmental conditions within the mine. This approach aligns with MSHA General Duty Clause, Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977, Section 101, and specific regulations concerning combustible materials, e.g., 30 CFR Part 75, Subpart L Fire Prevention and Control. It necessitates identifying potential ignition sources, understanding the susceptibility to spontaneous combustion, and implementing controls such as segregation, ventilation, and regular monitoring. This demonstrates a commitment to preventing fires before they start, which is the most effective and ethically sound strategy in mine safety. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate operational convenience over a thorough risk assessment fails to uphold the professional responsibility to protect miners' lives and health. Specifically, simply storing materials in the nearest available space without considering their fire hazards, including spontaneous combustion potential, violates the spirit and letter of MSHA regulations. This approach ignores the proactive nature of fire prevention mandated by MSHA and creates an environment where a fire could ignite and spread undetected, leading to potential catastrophic consequences. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on the presence of fire extinguishers as a primary control measure is also professionally unacceptable. While fire extinguishers are crucial components of a fire suppression plan, they are intended for initial attack on small fires and are not a substitute for robust fire prevention strategies. Relying on them as the sole or primary means of control for materials with spontaneous combustion potential demonstrates a misunderstanding of fire dynamics and MSHA emphasis on preventing fires from occurring in the first place. This approach is reactive rather than proactive and places an undue burden on firefighting resources in the event of an ignition. A third incorrect approach that involves delaying the assessment of stored materials until a specific incident occurs is a critical failure in professional judgment and regulatory compliance. MSHA regulations require ongoing vigilance and proactive measures to identify and mitigate hazards. Waiting for an incident to occur before addressing potential fire hazards related to stored materials is a dereliction of duty and significantly increases the risk to mine personnel and property. This approach is fundamentally reactive and contrary to the principles of effective mine safety management. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a hierarchical approach to hazard control: elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment. In this context, the primary focus should be on administrative controls, proper storage procedures, segregation and engineering controls, ventilation, monitoring to prevent fires. The decision-making process should always begin with a thorough hazard identification and risk assessment, followed by the implementation of the most effective controls available, prioritizing prevention over suppression. Question 3. The assessment process reveals that a significant number of employees, including contractors, are not consistently following the procedures outlined in their respective job hazard analyses, JHA, during routine tasks. This discrepancy was noted during a site safety audit. What is the most appropriate immediate corrective action to address this finding? Option A. Implement a zero-tolerance policy with immediate disciplinary action for any employee found not adhering to JHA procedures. Option B. Issue a general safety bulletin reminding all personnel of the importance of following JHAs and the potential consequences of noncompliance. Option C. Immediately revise all affected JHAs to reflect current practices, assuming the existing documentation is outdated. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the JHA development process, employee training on JHAs, and communication methods to identify systemic issues contributing to noncompliance, and then implement targeted corrective actions. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the JHA development process, employee training on JHAs, and communication methods to identify systemic issues contributing to noncompliance, and then implement targeted corrective actions. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in mine safety management: the disconnect between documented procedures and actual site practices. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not just identifying the gap, but also implementing a sustainable solution that addresses the root cause, which often lies in communication, training, or management commitment. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen corrective action is effective, compliant with MSHA regulations, and fosters a positive safety culture rather than simply a punitive response. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the job hazard analysis, JHA process, including its development, communication, and integration into daily work. This entails verifying that JHAs are current, accurately reflect site conditions and tasks, and are effectively communicated to all affected employees, including contractors. It also requires assessing the training provided on JHAs and the mechanisms for employee feedback and input into the JHA process. This aligns with MSHA emphasis on proactive hazard identification and control, as mandated by 30 CFR Part 48, training with a focus on hazard recognition, and the General Duty Clause, Section 101 of the Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977, which requires mine operators to provide safe and healthful working conditions. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to worker safety by ensuring they are aware of and understand the hazards associated with their tasks. An incorrect approach would be to immediately revise the JHA documentation without investigating the underlying reasons for the discrepancy. This fails to address the root cause, which could be inadequate training, poor communication channels, or a lack of management reinforcement. Such an approach risks creating new documentation that is equally ignored, leading to continued noncompliance and potential accidents. It also bypasses the critical element of employee involvement in hazard identification, a cornerstone of effective safety management. Another incorrect approach would be to solely focus on disciplinary action for the individuals performing the tasks incorrectly. While accountability is important, this reactive measure does not prevent future occurrences and can foster a climate of fear, discouraging employees from reporting hazards or near misses. MSHA regulatory framework emphasizes prevention and education over punishment as the primary means of improving safety. A third incorrect approach would be to assume the JHA itself is flawed and initiate a complete overhaul without first understanding how it is being used or not used in practice. This is inefficient and may lead to unnecessary changes that do not resolve the core issue of procedural adherence. The focus should be on the implementation and effectiveness of the existing JHA process, not just its content. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic, multifaceted approach. 1. Identify the discrepancy. Clearly define the gap between documented procedures and actual practice. 2. Investigate the root cause. Utilize methods like the 5 whys or fishbone diagrams to understand why the discrepancy exists. This should involve direct observation, interviews with affected personnel, including supervisors and frontline workers, and a review of relevant training records. 3. Evaluate existing controls. Assess the effectiveness of current hazard identification and risk assessment processes, including JHAs, SOP, and training. 4. Develop and implement corrective actions. Based on the root cause analysis, implement targeted interventions. This might include revising training programs, improving communication protocols, enhancing supervision, or updating documentation. 5. Monitor and evaluate. Track the effectiveness of corrective actions through ongoing audits, inspections, and performance metrics. 6. Foster continuous improvement. Embed lessons learned into the overall safety management system. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate a recurring pattern of minor injuries related to material handling in a specific underground mining operation. The mine safety professional, MSP, is tasked with optimizing this process to enhance safety. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Implement a new, more stringent disciplinary policy for any worker observed engaging in unsafe material handling practices. Option B. Focus on acquiring newer, more expensive material handling equipment, assuming that advanced technology alone will resolve the issue. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the material handling workflow, analyzing equipment usage, worker ergonomics, and environmental factors to identify inefficiencies contributing to the injuries, and then implement targeted procedural and technological improvements. Option D. Increase the frequency of toolbox talks, specifically addressing the risks associated with material handling, without altering the existing operational procedures. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the material handling workflow, analyzing equipment usage, worker ergonomics, and environmental factors to identify inefficiencies contributing to the injuries, and then implement targeted procedural and technological improvements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a mine safety professional, MSP, to move beyond simply identifying hazards to actively optimizing the processes that lead to those hazards. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with the imperative of worker safety, ensuring that improvements do not inadvertently create new risks or compromise existing safety measures. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective in reducing incidents and compliant with regulatory mandates. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven evaluation of existing mining processes to identify inefficiencies that contribute to safety risks. This includes analyzing incident reports, near-miss data, operational logs, and worker feedback to pinpoint root causes. The MSP then develops and implements targeted interventions, such as revising work procedures, introducing new technologies, or enhancing training, with a clear focus on measurable safety outcomes. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement mandated by regulatory frameworks that emphasize proactive hazard identification and control, and the ethical obligation of an MSP to protect the health and safety of miners. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reactive measures, such as increasing the frequency of inspections, without addressing underlying process flaws, fails to achieve true process optimization. This is a regulatory failure because it does not demonstrate a commitment to proactive risk management and may not effectively prevent recurring incidents. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes cost reduction over safety considerations during process changes, is both a regulatory and ethical failure. Regulations typically require that safety be a primary consideration in all operational decisions, and ethically, an MSP cannot compromise worker well-being for financial gain. A third incorrect approach, which involves implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or personal opinion without rigorous data analysis, lacks the scientific and systematic foundation required for effective safety management, and may lead to unintended negative consequences, violating the principle of evidence-based decision-making. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the regulatory requirements for process safety management. This framework should then incorporate a systematic data collection and analysis phase to identify root causes of safety issues. Following this, potential solutions should be evaluated based on their potential impact on safety, feasibility, and cost-effectiveness, always prioritizing safety. Implementation should be followed by rigorous monitoring and evaluation to ensure the effectiveness of the changes and to identify any new hazards introduced. This iterative process ensures continuous improvement and adherence to both regulatory and ethical standards. Question 5. Consider a scenario where a sudden, uncontrolled methane gas release occurs in a deep underground coal mine, leading to a rapid increase in methane concentration and the detection of a smoldering fire in a secondary access tunnel. The mine's emergency response plan, ERP, has been developed and approved according to MSHA regulations. The mine foreman on duty is the first to receive the initial alert from the gas monitoring system and visual confirmation of smoke. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the mine foreman? Option A. Direct all personnel in the immediate vicinity of the gas release and fire to attempt to extinguish the fire using available portable fire extinguishers before initiating any evacuation. Option B. Immediately initiate a full mine evacuation using all designated escape routes. Activate the mine's emergency communication system to alert all personnel and the mine rescue team, and notify the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, District Office. Option C. Instruct all personnel to shelter in place in their current locations until the extent of the fire and gas release can be fully determined by a specialized team. Option D. Wait for the mine rescue team to arrive and assess the situation before ordering any evacuation to avoid unnecessary panic. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a full mine evacuation using all designated escape routes. Activate the mine's emergency communication system to alert all personnel and the mine rescue team, and notify the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA District Office. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate, decisive action under pressure, balancing the immediate safety of personnel with the long-term implications of the emergency response. The mine operator must adhere strictly to established emergency preparedness protocols and regulatory mandates to ensure an effective and compliant response. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing the situation, prioritizing actions based on the severity of the event, and communicating effectively to all stakeholders while maintaining the integrity of the emergency response plan. The correct approach involves a systematic activation of the mine's emergency response plan ERP, prioritizing personnel safety through immediate evacuation of the affected area and initiating communication protocols to alert all relevant parties, including mine rescue teams and regulatory bodies. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the fundamental principles of mine safety regulations, which mandate comprehensive ERPs, clear evacuation procedures, and prompt reporting of significant incidents. The emphasis on immediate evacuation and communication ensures that the response is timely and coordinated, minimizing potential harm and facilitating external assistance. This proactive and structured response is ethically sound, demonstrating a commitment to the well-being of the workforce and compliance with legal obligations. An incorrect approach would be to delay evacuation to assess the full extent of the fire, potentially exposing more personnel to hazardous conditions. This fails to prioritize immediate safety and violates the principle of acting decisively in the face of a credible threat, as outlined in emergency preparedness guidelines. Another incorrect approach would be to fail to immediately notify the designated regulatory authority. This omission constitutes a direct violation of reporting requirements, which are critical for ensuring external oversight and support during emergencies, and can lead to significant penalties. Furthermore, relying solely on informal communication channels instead of the established mine communication system would undermine the ERP's integrity, leading to confusion, delays, and potentially missed critical information, thereby failing to meet the requirements for robust emergency communication. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate threat assessment, followed by the activation of predefined emergency procedures. This framework emphasizes adherence to the ERP, clear and consistent communication through designated channels, and prompt notification of all required parties. The process involves a continuous evaluation of the situation and adaptation of the response as new information becomes available, always prioritizing the safety of life and compliance with regulatory mandates. Question 6. The assessment process reveals a pattern of mobile equipment operators bypassing pre-operational inspection checklists and a noticeable increase in conveyor belt slippage incidents, suggesting potential issues with both operational procedures and equipment maintenance. As the mine safety professional, which of the following actions is the most appropriate and comprehensive response to address these observed deficiencies? Option A. Immediately implement mandatory refresher training for all mobile equipment operators on pre-operational inspection protocols and issue a directive to maintenance staff to address conveyor belt slippage as a priority. Option B. Temporarily halt all mobile equipment operations until a complete overhaul of the entire fleet's maintenance schedule can be completed and all operators have successfully passed a new certification exam. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of all mobile equipment pre-operational inspection procedures and checklists, verify the current maintenance logs and schedules for conveyor systems, and assess the effectiveness of existing equipment guarding on all relevant machinery. Option D. Issue formal warnings to all mobile equipment operators found to be neglecting their pre-operational inspections and schedule immediate repairs for all identified conveyor belt issues. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of all mobile equipment pre-operational inspection procedures and checklists, verify the current maintenance logs and schedules for conveyor systems, and assess the effectiveness of existing equipment guarding on all relevant machinery. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in mine safety, ensuring effective communication and adherence to safety protocol across different operational roles. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a mine safety professional to balance the immediate need for production with the paramount importance of safety, specifically concerning mobile equipment operation. The potential for serious accidents involving powered haulage and mobile equipment necessitates a rigorous and systematic approach to inspections, maintenance, and operational procedures. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the observed noncompliance and to implement corrective actions that are both effective and sustainable. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of existing equipment safety procedures, focusing on the specific deficiencies identified during the assessment. This includes verifying that pre-operational inspections are being conducted diligently, that maintenance schedules are being followed, and that operators are adhering to established safe operating procedures for mobile equipment and powered haulage. Furthermore, it requires an evaluation of the effectiveness of guarding on all moving parts of equipment, including conveyors. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the observed issues through a systematic, evidence-based review, aligning with the fundamental principles of mine safety regulations, which mandate proactive hazard identification, risk assessment, and control measures. It emphasizes a holistic view of equipment safety, encompassing inspection, maintenance, operation, and physical safeguards, as required by regulatory frameworks designed to prevent accidents. An incorrect approach that relies solely on retraining operators without investigating the underlying causes of noncompliance is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address potential systemic issues such as inadequate inspection checklists, deferred maintenance, or poorly designed operating procedures. It also overlooks the critical role of equipment guarding, which is a passive safety measure that must be maintained regardless of operator training. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on immediate disciplinary action for operators, without a thorough review of procedures and equipment condition, is also professionally flawed. This reactive measure may not prevent future incidents if the root causes are not identified and rectified. It also fails to acknowledge that operator error can sometimes be a symptom of larger organizational or equipment-related problems. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes production targets over addressing safety concerns, even temporarily, is ethically and regulatorily indefensible. Mine safety regulations unequivocally place the prevention of accidents and the protection of miners' lives above production goals. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly investigate the observed safety deficiencies to identify root causes, considering equipment condition, procedural adequacy, training effectiveness, and environmental factors. Second, consult relevant mine safety regulations and internal company policies to ensure all actions are compliant and best practice. Third, develop and implement a corrective action plan that addresses all identified root causes, prioritizing immediate hazards and implementing long-term solutions. Fourth, monitor the effectiveness of corrective actions and conduct follow-up assessments to ensure sustained compliance and continuous improvement in equipment safety. Question 7. The performance metrics show a significant increase in reported near misses related to chemical handling, with anecdotal evidence suggesting that a portion of the workforce struggles to fully comprehend the hazard information provided. The mine's current hazard communication program primarily relies on English language MSDS and brief annual training sessions. Considering the diverse linguistic backgrounds of the miners, which of the following approaches would best optimize the effectiveness of the hazard communication program to ensure all employees understand chemical hazards and protective measures? Option A. Translate all material safety data sheets, MSDS, into the primary languages spoken by the workforce and incorporate visual aids, pictograms, and hands-on demonstrations into the annual training, followed by comprehension checks. Option B. Replace all MSDS with simplified one-page summaries in English that highlight the most critical hazards. Option C. Focus on increasing the frequency of the annual training sessions without altering the content or language. Option D. Continue to provide MSDS in English and conduct the annual training as usual, assuming employees will seek clarification if needed. The correct answer is A. Translate all material safety data sheets, MSDS, into the primary languages spoken by the workforce and incorporate visual aids, pictograms, and hands-on demonstrations into the annual training, followed by comprehension checks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in mine safety, ensuring effective hazard communication despite potential barriers like language and varying levels of literacy among the workforce. The professional challenge lies in translating regulatory requirements into practical, accessible information that all miners can understand and utilize to protect themselves. This requires more than just compliance. It demands a proactive and inclusive approach to safety training and information dissemination. Careful judgment is required to select methods that genuinely enhance comprehension and retention, rather than simply fulfilling a checklist. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a multifaceted strategy that directly addresses the identified communication barriers. It involves translating hazard information into the primary languages spoken by the workforce and utilizing visual aids and demonstrations to supplement written materials. This aligns with the spirit and intent of the Hazard Communication Standard, HAZCOM, which mandates that employers provide information about hazardous chemicals in a manner that employees can understand. By employing multiple communication channels and formats, this approach ensures that the information is accessible to a broader range of employees, regardless of their primary language or literacy level, thereby promoting a safer working environment. This proactive and inclusive method is ethically sound and professionally responsible. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on providing material safety data sheets, MSDS, in English, assuming all employees can read and understand them. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement of making hazard information understandable to all employees. It creates a significant ethical failure by neglecting the safety of a portion of the workforce and a regulatory failure by not ensuring comprehension. Another incorrect approach relies exclusively on verbal training sessions, without any supporting materials or follow-up. While verbal communication is important, it can be prone to misinterpretation, and employees may forget details without reinforcement. This approach risks not providing a comprehensive understanding of chemical hazards and their associated risks, potentially leading to noncompliance with the HAZCOM standards intent to ensure effective communication. A third incorrect approach involves distributing generic hazard labels without specific chemical identification or clear pictograms. This is a direct violation of labeling requirements under HAZCOM, which mandates specific information to be present on labels. It fails to provide employees with the critical, specific information needed to identify hazards and take appropriate precautions, representing a severe regulatory and ethical lapse. Professional reasoning. When faced with diverse workforces and potential communication barriers, professionals must adopt a train-the-trainer or train-the-worker model that prioritizes comprehension over mere distribution of information. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all hazardous chemicals present in the workplace. 2. Determining the primary languages and literacy levels of the workforce. 3. Selecting communication methods that cater to these diverse needs, including translation, visual aids, and hands-on demonstrations. 4. Verifying comprehension through practical assessments or interactive questioning. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the hazard communication program to ensure its continued effectiveness. This systematic approach ensures that the hazard communication standard is not just met, but truly implemented to protect all miners. Question 8. Governance review demonstrates that a mine operator is seeking to update its annual refresher training program. The operator has proposed two distinct approaches, one that focuses on delivering the maximum number of mandated training hours using a standardized online module, and another that emphasizes hands-on practical exercises and site-specific hazard identification, with evaluation tied to demonstrated task proficiency. Which approach best aligns with the principles of effective mine safety training and regulatory compliance under U.S. MSHA regulations? Option A. An approach that prioritizes the lowest cost per training hour, regardless of content relevance or evaluation methods. Option B. The approach emphasizing hands-on practical exercises and site-specific hazard identification with evaluation tied to demonstrated task proficiency. Option C. The approach focusing on delivering the maximum number of mandated training hours using a standardized online module. Option D. An approach that relies on a train-the-trainer program, where experienced miners deliver the training without formal curriculum development. The correct answer is B. The approach emphasizing hands-on practical exercises and site-specific hazard identification with evaluation tied to demonstrated task proficiency. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a mine safety professional to balance the immediate need for compliance with the long-term effectiveness of safety training. The challenge lies in selecting a training methodology that not only meets the minimum regulatory requirements, but also demonstrably improves miner competency and reduces risk. Careful judgment is required to avoid superficial compliance that could lead to continued safety incidents. The correct approach involves developing a competency-based training program that directly links training content and evaluation to the specific tasks and hazards faced by miners. This approach is right because it aligns with the spirit and intent of regulatory frameworks like the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA regulations in the United States, which emphasize ensuring miners are adequately trained to perform their duties safely. Competency-based training moves beyond simply delivering information. It verifies that miners can apply that knowledge and skill in real-world situations, thereby fulfilling the regulatory mandate to prevent accidents and injuries. This method also supports the ethical obligation to protect miner well-being. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the quantity of training hours without assessing actual competency fails to meet regulatory expectations. MSHA regulations, for instance, require training to be adequate and effective, not just lengthy. This approach risks superficial understanding and a false sense of security, potentially leading to regulatory violations and, more importantly, increased accident rates. Another incorrect approach that relies on generic, off-the-shelf training materials without tailoring them to the specific mine site's hazards and operational procedures is also professionally unacceptable. Regulations often require training to be relevant to the miner's specific job tasks and the conditions present at the mine. Generic training may not address unique risks, rendering it ineffective and non-compliant. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings over training quality, such as using unqualified trainers or inadequate training resources, directly contravenes the regulatory requirement for competent instruction and effective training delivery. This can lead to misinformation, poor skill development, and ultimately, a compromised safety culture. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of training needs, a clear understanding of applicable regulatory requirements, e.g., MSHA Part 48 for surface and Part 46 for underground miners, and the selection of training methods that demonstrably lead to improved miner competency and a reduction in safety incidents. This includes establishing clear learning objectives, developing relevant training content, implementing effective delivery methods, and conducting robust evaluations to verify competency. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a significant underground mine incident has occurred, resulting in multiple miners being trapped and potential atmospheric hazards. The mine operator has received initial reports but lacks precise details on the miner's exact location or the extent of the hazards. Given these circumstances, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to initiate mine rescue and recovery operations in compliance with U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration (MSHA) regulations? Option A. Begin a full-scale recovery operation by sending personnel to clear debris and assess structural integrity without first establishing communication or a command structure. Option B. Prioritize the recovery of critical mining equipment and infrastructure before commencing any search for trapped miners. Option C. Immediately dispatch all available mine rescue teams to the last known location of the trapped miners to begin search and rescue efforts. Option D. Establish a formal incident command post, notify MSHA, and deploy trained mine rescue teams under the direction of a designated incident commander to assess the situation and initiate rescue operations. The correct answer is C. Immediately dispatch all available mine rescue teams to the last known location of the trapped miners to begin search and rescue efforts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate, critical decision-making under extreme pressure with potentially life-or-death consequences. The mine operator faces a dual responsibility: ensuring the safety of the rescue personnel while also maximizing the chances of survival for trapped miners. The limited information available, the dynamic nature of a mine emergency, and the potential for secondary hazards, e.g., gas buildup, structural collapse, necessitate a systematic and compliant approach to rescue operations. Failure to adhere to established protocols can lead to increased risk to rescuers, hinder rescue efforts, and potentially violate regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing the establishment of a secure command structure and immediate communication with mine rescue teams and relevant authorities. This aligns with the fundamental principles of emergency management and mine safety regulations, such as those promulgated by the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, in the United States. Specifically, 30 CFR Part 49 Mine Rescue Teams and Part 50 Notification, Investigation, Reports, and Records of Accidents and Related Activities mandate clear lines of authority, prompt reporting, and the organized deployment of trained rescue personnel and equipment. Establishing a command post ensures coordinated efforts, efficient resource allocation, and accurate situational awareness, which are critical for effective search and rescue techniques and post-accident recovery. This approach prioritizes safety, compliance, and operational effectiveness. Incorrect approach is analysis. Directly deploying uncoordinated rescue teams without a clear command structure is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses established MSHA requirements for organized mine rescue operations, potentially leading to untrained personnel entering hazardous areas, lack of communication, and inefficient use of resources. It also increases the risk of secondary accidents involving the rescue teams themselves. Initiating a full-scale recovery operation without first assessing the immediate safety of the mine environment and establishing communication protocols is also a failure. This could expose rescuers to immediate dangers like toxic gases or unstable ground, violating the MSHA General Duty Clause and specific requirements for hazard assessment and control. It also neglects the critical need for communication during rescue operations, as mandated by various MSHA regulations concerning emergency procedures. Focusing solely on the recovery of equipment before accounting for the safety and location of trapped miners is a severe ethical and regulatory breach. Mine safety regulations prioritize human life above all else. This approach would violate the spirit and letter of MSHA regulation, which mandate that all efforts be directed towards the rescue and recovery of personnel. Professional reasoning. In such a critical situation, a mine operator must first activate their established emergency response plan. This plan should detail the immediate steps for establishing a unified command, notifying MSHA, and deploying trained mine rescue teams. The decision-making process should follow a hierarchy of safety and operational priorities. Secure the scene, establish communication, assess hazards, deploy trained rescue personnel under a command structure, and then proceed with search and rescue techniques and post-accident recovery. Adherence to MSHA regulations and industry best practices is paramount to ensuring the safety of all involved and maximizing the chances of a successful outcome. Question 10. Market research demonstrates that mine operators are increasingly interested in consolidating safety monitoring functions to improve efficiency. A mine operator is considering a new industrial hygiene program that proposes using a single, multifunction monitoring unit to assess airborne dust levels, noise exposure, and the presence of specific chemical contaminants simultaneously during routine inspections. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and effective hazard control under MSHA? Option A. Implement a single multifunction monitoring unit that claims to measure dust, noise, and chemical contaminants, assuming its broad capabilities satisfy all regulatory requirements. Option B. Combine noise and dust monitoring into a single sampling event using a single device, and conduct separate, less frequent spot checks for chemical contaminants. Option C. Prioritize cost-effectiveness by utilizing the multifunction unit for all monitoring and reducing the frequency of sampling for dust and noise to the lowest acceptable level, relying on visual inspection for chemical hazards. Option D. Develop a comprehensive industrial hygiene program with distinct, validated protocols for dust monitoring, noise monitoring, and chemical exposure assessment, utilizing appropriate, calibrated instrumentation for each hazard, and integrating data management for reporting. The correct answer is D. Develop a comprehensive industrial hygiene program with distinct, validated protocols for dust monitoring, noise monitoring, and chemical exposure assessment, utilizing appropriate, calibrated instrumentation for each hazard, and integrating data management for reporting. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in industrial hygiene, where a mine operator is seeking to streamline their safety program by integrating multiple monitoring functions. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that this integration does not compromise the specific regulatory requirements for each distinct monitoring program, particularly concerning air sampling, noise, and chemical exposure, all of which have detailed mandates under MSHA regulations. The risk is that a consolidated approach, while potentially efficient, might overlook critical nuances in sampling strategies, analytical methods, or record-keeping specific to each hazard, leading to non-compliance and inadequate worker protection. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with stringent regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves developing a comprehensive industrial hygiene program that clearly delineates separate, yet integrated protocols for air sampling, noise monitoring, chemical exposure assessment, and dust monitoring. This approach is right because it directly aligns with the Mine Safety and Health Administration's MSHA regulatory framework, particularly 30 CFR Part 50, Accidents, Injuries, and Illnesses, and Part 57, Health and Safety Standards for Metal and Non-Metal Mines, or Part 70/71, Mandatory Health Standards for Coal Mines, depending on the mine type. These regulations mandate specific requirements for monitoring respirable dust, noise levels, and chemical contaminants, each with distinct sampling frequencies, analytical methods, exposure limits, and record-keeping obligations. A program that addresses each of these individually, while allowing for coordinated data management and reporting, ensures that all regulatory mandates are met comprehensively and accurately, thereby protecting miners from recognized health hazards. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that relies solely on a single, generic monitoring device for all industrial hygiene parameters is incorrect because it fails to acknowledge the specialized nature of each hazard. For instance, a device designed for general dust monitoring may not have the sensitivity or specificity to accurately assess chemical exposures to specific toxic substances, nor can it measure noise levels. This violates MSHA requirement for appropriate monitoring methods tailored to the specific hazard. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that combining noise and dust monitoring into a single sampling event, without considering the distinct sampling duration, calibration requirements, and analytical procedures mandated by MSHA for each, is sufficient. This overlooks the fact that noise exposure is typically measured over a full shift or representative portion thereof, while dust sampling might require specific flow rates and filter types for accurate gravimetric analysis. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost savings by reducing the frequency of monitoring for certain hazards below MSHA-specified minimums, or by using less sensitive analytical techniques, is fundamentally flawed. This directly contravenes regulatory requirements for monitoring frequency and analytical rigor, leading to potential underestimation of exposures and noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach integrated industrial hygiene programs by first thoroughly understanding the specific MSHA regulations applicable to their mine type, e.g., coal vs. metal/non-metal. This involves identifying the distinct monitoring requirements for dust, noise, and chemical exposures, including permissible exposure limits, PEL, sampling methodologies, analytical techniques, calibration schedule, and record-keeping mandates. The next step is to design a program that addresses each of these requirements independently, ensuring that the chosen equipment and procedures are appropriate for each specific hazard. Integration should focus on data management, reporting, and the development of a unified safety culture, rather than on merging distinct monitoring protocols. This systematic, hazard-specific approach ensures regulatory compliance and effective worker protection. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal a decline in the effectiveness of the mine's behavior-based safety program, characterized by a decrease in the quality of safety observations and a perceived reduction in employee engagement with the program. The mine safety professional is tasked with recommending corrective actions. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation in accordance with MSHA regulations and best practices for safety culture development? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the BBS program's observation protocols, feedback mechanisms, and coaching techniques, alongside an assessment of the current safety culture and employee engagement levels, to identify root causes and implement targeted improvements. Option B. Initiate a series of disciplinary actions against employees who are identified as consistently submitting low-quality observations or demonstrating disengagement with the BBS program, emphasizing individual accountability. Option C. Recommend the immediate suspension of the current BBS program and explore alternative, less labor-intensive hazard identification methods to reduce the perceived burden on employees. Option D. Mandate an increase in the number of safety observations completed by all personnel, with a focus on meeting quantitative targets, and implement stricter penalties for incomplete or inaccurate observation forms. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the BBS program's observation protocols, feedback mechanisms, and coaching techniques, alongside an assessment of the current safety culture and employee engagement levels, to identify root causes and implement targeted improvements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a mine safety professional to navigate the complexities of a behavior-based safety (BBS) program that is showing signs of decline in effectiveness. The challenge lies in identifying the root causes of this decline and implementing corrective actions that are both compliant with regulatory requirements and conducive to fostering a positive safety culture. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial fixes and address underlying systemic issues that may be contributing to reduced employee engagement and observation quality. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the BBS program's implementation, focusing on the quality of observations, the effectiveness of feedback and coaching, and the overall health of the safety culture. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core components of a successful BBS program as mandated and encouraged by the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, regulations, particularly those emphasizing employee participation and the identification and control of hazards. MSHA emphasis on proactive hazard identification and the development of a strong safety culture, which includes open communication and employee involvement, is directly supported by a thorough evaluation and refinement of the BBS program. Ethically, this approach prioritizes the well-being of the workforce by seeking to improve the program's ability to prevent injuries. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of observations without addressing the quality or the subsequent feedback loop is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This superficial increase fails to meet the spirit of MSHA requirements for meaningful hazard identification and correction, can lead to a perception of checking a box rather than genuine safety improvement, potentially eroding trust and engagement. Another incorrect approach that involves blaming individual minors for observation errors or declining participation, rather than examining the program's structure, training, or management support, is also ethically unacceptable and regulatorily unsound. MSHA regulations emphasize a systemic approach to safety, and attributing failures solely to individual behavior without considering organizational factors is a misinterpretation of safety principles and can create a punitive environment, which is counterproductive to building a positive safety culture. A third incorrect approach that involves discontinuing the BBS program due to perceived ineffectiveness without a thorough root cause analysis and a plan for alternative or improved hazard identification methods is also problematic. This abdication of responsibility fails to meet the ongoing obligation to proactively manage safety and can leave the mine vulnerable to unaddressed hazards. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic, data-driven evaluation of the BBS program. This includes analyzing observation data for trends, reviewing feedback mechanisms, assessing the quality of coaching, and gathering employee perceptions through surveys or focus groups. The goal is to identify specific areas for improvement, develop targeted interventions, and monitor their effectiveness, always in alignment with MSHA regulatory framework and the ethical imperative to protect miner health and safety. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows a mine operator reviewing their current practices for storing and handling explosives. The operator is considering two potential adjustments. 1. Relocating a portion of the stored explosives to a temporary, more accessible site near active mining areas to reduce transport time. And 2. Implementing a new, streamlined inventory tracking system that relies on digital logs rather than physical manifests. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for explosive storage and handling under MSHA? Option A. Proceed with the relocation to the temporary site for operational efficiency and implement the digital inventory system, deferring full MSHA compliance checks until after the changes are in place. Option B. Prioritize the relocation of explosives to the temporary site and implement the digital inventory system, assuming the temporary site is adequately secured and the digital system is efficient. Option C. Implement the digital inventory system immediately for improved record keeping and postpone any changes to storage locations until a comprehensive review of all MSHA regulations is completed. Option D. Focus on ensuring the temporary storage site meets all MSHA requirements for permanent magazines, including construction and security, and fully validate the digital inventory system's compliance with MSHA record keeping before implementation. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the relocation of explosives to the temporary site and implement the digital inventory system, assuming the temporary site is adequately secured and the digital system is efficient. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a mine operator facing a common challenge in blasting operations, ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements for explosive storage and handling, while also optimizing blasting outcomes. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of both safety regulations and operational efficiency. The operator must balance the stringent legal mandates for secure storage and safe handling of explosives with the practical need to have materials readily available for blasting operations, all while minimizing risks to personnel and the environment. Failure to adhere to regulations can result in severe penalties, including fines, operational shutdowns, and legal liabilities, while inefficient handling can impact productivity and cost. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the Mine Safety and Health Administration (MSHA) regulations pertaining to explosive storage and handling, specifically focusing on 30 CFR Part 55, Subpart E, and related guidance documents. This approach prioritizes understanding and implementing the specific requirements for magazine construction, location, security, inventory control, and transportation of explosives within the mine. It also necessitates a thorough assessment of the mine's current handling procedures to identify any deviations from regulatory standards or best practices. By aligning storage and handling protocols directly with MSHA mandates, the operator ensures legal compliance, minimizes the risk of accidental detonation or theft, and establishes a safe working environment. This proactive stance is ethically sound, as it upholds the duty of care owed to employees and the public. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate operational convenience over regulatory compliance. For instance, storing explosives in an unsecured, temporary location closer to the blast site solely to reduce transport time would be a significant regulatory failure. MSHA regulations strictly define approved storage locations and security measures to prevent unauthorized access and accidental initiation. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on outdated or informal handling procedures that do not account for the specific hazards of the explosives being used or the current regulatory landscape. This could lead to improper loading, stemming, or initiation, increasing the risk of misfires or unintended detonations. Furthermore, neglecting to maintain accurate and up-to-date inventory records, as required by MSHA, poses a security risk and hinders effective incident investigation if a discrepancy arises. These approaches demonstrate a disregard for established safety protocols and legal obligations, potentially leading to severe safety incidents and regulatory enforcement actions. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, identify the specific regulatory framework applicable to the operation, in this case, MSHA. Second, thoroughly understand the requirements within that framework related to the operational challenge. Third, assess current practices against these requirements. Fourth, develop and implement corrective actions that bring practices into full compliance. Finally, establish a system for ongoing monitoring and review to ensure sustained compliance and continuous improvement in safety and operational efficiency. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and prioritize the safety and well-being of all stakeholders. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current mine lighting system is perceived as energy-intensive and prone to frequent bulb failures, leading to intermittent periods of reduced visibility in critical work areas. Considering MSHA regulations for mine lighting, which approach best optimizes both safety and operational efficiency for this underground metal and non-metal mine? Option A. Focus solely on reducing energy consumption by dimming existing lights to the lowest possible setting during non-peak hours, without assessing if this reduced illumination still meets MSHA requirements for hazard identification and safe task performance. Option B. Implement a phased upgrade to energy-efficient LED lighting fixtures, coupled with a preventative maintenance schedule that includes regular cleaning of fixtures and proactive replacement of bulbs based on manufacturer recommendations and operational hours. Option C. Install the most advanced, high-lumen output LED lighting system available without a detailed analysis of task-specific illumination needs or potential glare issues, assuming that higher brightness universally equates to improved safety. Option D. Conduct a one-time, comprehensive lighting audit to identify all areas with illumination below MSHA minimum, recommended lux levels, and immediately replace all non-compliant fixtures with the cheapest available, high-wattage incandescent bulbs to ensure immediate compliance. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased upgrade to energy-efficient LED lighting fixtures, coupled with a preventative maintenance schedule that includes regular cleaning of fixtures and proactive replacement of bulbs based on manufacturer recommendations and operational hours. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with the paramount safety mandate of mine lighting, specifically under the U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration (MSHA) regulations. The challenge lies in identifying a lighting design that not only meets the minimum illumination requirements for various mining tasks, but also optimizes energy consumption and maintenance without compromising worker visibility and hazard perception. Careful judgment is required to interpret MSHA performance-oriented standards, which often necessitate a proactive and adaptive approach rather than a purely prescriptive one. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of task-specific lighting needs, considering factors like color rendering, uniformity, and the potential for glare, in conjunction with an evaluation of energy-efficient technologies and a robust maintenance schedule. This aligns with MSHA General Duty Clause and specific standards for illumination, e.g., 30 CFR Part 57, 18,002 for underground metal and nonmetal mines, or equivalent for surface operations, which mandate adequate illumination to prevent accidents and ensure safe working conditions. A well-designed and maintained lighting system directly contributes to hazard identification, such as detecting changes in ground conditions, moving equipment, or the presence of other personnel, thereby fulfilling the ethical obligation to protect miners' well-being. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing initial installation costs without considering long-term maintenance or operational effectiveness would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the spirit and intent of MSHA regulations, which implicitly require sustainable safety solutions. Such an approach could lead to inadequate illumination over time as bulbs degrade or fixtures become dirty, increasing the risk of accidents due to poor visibility. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the latest, high-intensity lighting technology without a thorough analysis of its suitability for the specific mining environment and tasks would also be flawed. While advanced technology can be beneficial, it must be integrated thoughtfully. For instance, overly bright or poorly directed lights can cause glare, creating new hazards by obscuring vision or causing temporary blindness, which is contrary to the goal of enhancing safety. This approach neglects the critical aspect of lighting design that considers the human visual system and the specific operational context. A third incorrect approach that relies on a reactive maintenance strategy, addressing lighting failures only after they occur, is also professionally unsound. MSHA regulations, while not always dictating specific maintenance schedules, imply a need for proactive measures to ensure continuous compliance and safety. A reactive approach increases the likelihood of periods of inadequate illumination, thereby elevating accident risk and potentially leading to citations for non-compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of MSHA regulatory requirements, a thorough understanding of the operational environment and tasks, an assessment of available lighting technologies and their life cycle costs, and the development of a proactive maintenance plan. This process should be iterative, incorporating feedback from mine personnel and periodic reevaluations to ensure the lighting system remains effective and compliant. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a full multi-point atmospheric testing protocol and a detailed rescue plan for every confined space entry in the new shaft excavation will incur significant time delays and increased labor costs compared to a simplified visual inspection and reliance on immediate surface support. Which approach best aligns with the certified mine safety professional's duty to protect miners? Option A. Implement the full, multi-point atmospheric testing protocol and detailed rescue plan as mandated by MSHA regulations, accepting the associated delays and costs. Option B. Prioritize the time savings and cost reduction by proceeding with entry based on the cost-benefit analysis, with minimal pre-entry safety checks. Option C. Proceed with entry after a visual inspection and a single, basic atmospheric test for oxygen level, assuming the space is safe due to recent excavation activity. Option D. Conduct entry with only a visual inspection, relying on the assumption that the immediate proximity of surface personnel constitutes an adequate rescue capability. The correct answer is A. Implement the full multi-point atmospheric testing protocol and detailed rescue plan as mandated by MSHA regulations, accepting the associated delays and costs. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with the paramount importance of worker safety in a high-risk environment. The decision-maker must critically assess the effectiveness and compliance of safety protocols against the perceived urgency of the task, understanding that any deviation from established procedures can have severe, potentially fatal, consequences. The core of the challenge lies in resisting pressure to cut corners when faced with time constraints or perceived minor risks, and instead prioritizing a thorough, compliant safety approach. The correct approach is to meticulously follow the established confined space entry procedures, including comprehensive atmospheric testing, proper ventilation, and ensuring all required permits and personal protective equipment are in place before any entry. This is justified by the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, regulations, specifically 30 CFR Part 57, which mandates stringent safety protocols for entry into hazardous atmospheres and confined spaces within metal and non-metal mines. These regulations are designed to prevent fatalities and serious injuries by systematically identifying and mitigating hazards. Ethical considerations also strongly support this approach, as mine safety professionals have a moral and legal obligation to protect the lives and health of miners. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a visual inspection and the assumption that the space is safe due to recent work. This fails to address the invisible hazards like oxygen deficiency, flammable gases, or toxic contaminants that atmospheric testing is designed to detect. MSHA regulations require specific atmospheric testing before entry, not just visual checks. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with entry after only a cursory atmospheric test that does not cover all potential hazards or is not conducted by a trained person. This violates the requirement for thorough and accurate testing as stipulated by MSHA. Regulations emphasize the need for calibrated testing equipment and testing for all relevant atmospheric contaminants. A third incorrect approach would be to bypass the rescue plan requirement, believing it is unnecessary for a short entry or because rescue personnel are readily available nearby. MSHA regulations mandate a comprehensive rescue plan, including trained personnel and appropriate equipment, for all confined space entries. The absence of a formal, predefined rescue plan significantly increases the risk to entrance should an emergency occur. A professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk assessment that prioritizes regulatory compliance and worker safety above all else. This includes 1. Thoroughly understanding the specific hazards associated with the confined space and the task. 2. Rigorously adhering to all applicable MSHA regulations and company-specific safety procedures. 3. Ensuring all personnel involved are adequately trained and equipped. 4. Verifying that all safety checks, including atmospheric testing and rescue plan activation, are completed and documented before entry. 5. Never compromising on safety procedures due to time pressure or perceived minor risks. Question 15. Operational review demonstrates that a critical walkway at a significant height in an active production area has a section of its guardrail missing, creating an immediate fall hazard. The mine supervisor, under pressure to meet production quotas, suggests allowing work to continue while assuring the safety professional that the guardrail will be repaired by the end of the shift. The safety professional is aware that the missing section is in a high-traffic area for personnel movement during the shift. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action for the Certified Mine Safety Professional, CMSP, in this situation, adhering strictly to U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, regulations? Option A. Suggest a temporary, non-standard barrier be erected by the crew to cordon off the immediate area of the missing guardrail, allowing work to proceed with increased vigilance. Option B. Document the hazard and allow work to continue, relying on the supervisor's verbal assurance that the repair will be completed by the end of the shift, while reminding workers to be cautious. Option C. Immediately halt all operations in the affected area until the guardrail is fully repaired and inspected, ensuring no personnel are exposed to the fall hazard. Option D. Inform the supervisor that the hazard needs to be addressed but defer enforcement action until the next scheduled safety inspection to avoid disrupting production. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt all operations in the affected area until the guardrail is fully repaired and inspected, ensuring no personnel are exposed to the fall hazard. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between immediate production demands and the imperative to maintain a safe working environment, specifically concerning fall protection. The mine safety professional is tasked with balancing operational efficiency with the absolute requirement to prevent falls, which are a leading cause of serious injury and fatality in mining. The ethical dilemma arises from the pressure to overlook a known hazard to meet production targets versus upholding the fundamental duty to protect worker safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure that safety protocols are not compromised, regardless of external pressures. The correct approach involves immediately halting operations in the affected area until the identified fall hazard is rectified and appropriate fall protection systems are implemented and verified. This aligns with the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, regulations, particularly 30 CFR Part 48, training with respect to health and safety, and 30 CFR Part 56/57, Health and Safety Standards for Metal and Non-Metal Mines/Coal Mines, which mandate that mine operators provide a safe working environment and implement measures to prevent falls from heights. Specifically, standards related to working at heights, e.g., 30 CFR 56, 11,001, 57, 11,001, require employers to protect miners from hazards of falling. Ethically, the mine safety professional has a duty of care to the miners, which supersedes production goals. An incorrect approach would be to allow work to continue with a verbal assurance from the supervisor that the issue will be addressed later. This fails to comply with MSHA proactive hazard identification and abatement requirements. It creates an unacceptable risk of immediate injury or fatality, violating the ethical obligation to protect workers. Furthermore, it undermines the authority and purpose of safety protocols and training, potentially leading to a culture where safety is secondary to production. Another incorrect approach would be to document the hazard but not enforce its immediate correction, relying on the supervisor's promise of future action. This is a failure to act decisively in the face of a known, serious hazard. MSHA regulations require prompt abatement of hazardous conditions. Ethically, this constitutes negligence, as the professional is aware of a dangerous situation and fails to take the necessary steps to prevent harm. A third incorrect approach would be to suggest a temporary, less robust solution without proper assessment or approval, such as using a makeshift guardrail. This bypasses established safety procedures and the proper selection and implementation of fall protection systems, which are detailed in MSHA standards and industry best practices. It risks creating a false sense of security while still exposing miners to fall hazards, violating both regulatory requirements for effective fall protection and the ethical duty to ensure worker safety is paramount. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of regulatory mandates, a commitment to ethical principles of worker protection, and a systematic approach to hazard management. This includes 1. Immediate identification and assessment of the hazard. 2. Strict adherence to regulatory requirements for hazard abatement and fall protection. 3. Clear communication with all relevant parties, including management and affected workers, regarding the hazard and necessary corrective actions. 4. Enforcement of safety protocols, including the authority to stop work if necessary to prevent imminent danger. 5. Ensuring proper training on fall hazards and the correct use of fall protection systems is provided and understood. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates a recent history of minor roof falls in a specific section of an underground coal mine utilizing the room and pillar method. During the current shift, a significant sag is observed in the roof of a working pillar, accompanied by audible creaking sounds. The section foreman is under pressure from management to maintain production targets. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the mine safety professional to recommend and ensure is implemented? Option A. Advise the foreman to have the miners work around the affected area, focusing extraction on adjacent pillars to avoid disturbing the unstable ground, and to document the sag as a minor observation. Option B. Immediately cease all mining operations in the affected section, withdraw all personnel to a safe location, and initiate a thorough inspection by a qualified person to assess the ground conditions and determine appropriate support measures in accordance with the approved roof control plan. Option C. Recommend that miners monitor the sag closely and report any further significant changes, allowing operations to continue as long as the sag does not appear to be immediately catastrophic. Option D. Instruct miners to install temporary blocking and continue working in the section, while a more detailed assessment is scheduled for the next shift, emphasizing the need to meet production quotas. The correct answer is B. Immediately cease all mining operations in the affected section, withdraw all personnel to a safe location, and initiate a thorough inspection by a qualified person to assess the ground conditions and determine appropriate support measures in accordance with the approved roof control plan. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the mine safety professional to balance immediate production pressures with the absolute imperative of ensuring worker safety, particularly concerning ground stability in a dynamic underground environment. The decision-making process must be grounded in a thorough understanding of MSHA regulatory framework for roof and ground control, emphasizing proactive hazard identification and mitigation over reactive responses. The correct approach involves a systematic, multifaceted strategy that prioritizes worker safety and regulatory compliance. This includes immediate cessation of operations in the affected area, thorough inspection by qualified personnel, implementation of appropriate ground support measures as dictated by the mine's approved roof control plan, and clear communication with the workforce and MSHA. This approach is justified by 30 CFR Part 57. 3200, which mandates that mine operators take necessary precautions to prevent injury from falls of roof and sides, and 30 CFR Part 57. 3201, requiring that all persons be withdrawn from areas where there is imminent danger. Furthermore, the mine's approved roof control plan, developed in accordance with 30 CFR Part 57. 3203, outlines the specific procedures for addressing ground falls and requires adherence to its provisions. An incorrect approach that involves continuing operations with minimal, ad hoc support measures fails to meet the regulatory requirement for adequate ground control and the prohibition of operating in imminent danger. This directly violates 30 CFR Part 57, 3230 CFR Part 57, 3201. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying comprehensive support until after the shift to minimize production downtime, constitutes a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This prioritizes economic considerations over human life and safety, contravening the fundamental principles of mine safety and the explicit mandates of MSHA regulations. Finally, an approach that relies solely on the judgment of individual miners, without a formal inspection and approval process by qualified personnel or supervisors, bypasses established safety protocols and the requirements for a systematic approach to ground control, potentially leading to inadequate hazard assessment and control, and violating the spirit and letter of 30 CFR Part 57, 3200, and the mine's approved roof control plan. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with hazard recognition and immediate risk assessment. This involves understanding the potential consequences of inaction, consulting relevant regulations and the mine's approved plans, and prioritizing worker safety above all else. Communication and documentation are critical throughout the process, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 17. Process analysis reveals a surface mine operating under MSHA regulations is experiencing increased production demands. During a routine shift, an experienced haul truck operator reports observing what appears to be minor cracking and some loose material at the base of a high wall near a frequently used haul road. The mine supervisor, under pressure to maintain output, suggests the operator continue working as long as the cracks are not actively widening and the material is not falling. What is the most appropriate safety approach in this situation? Option A. Instruct the haul truck operator to continue working, but to be extra vigilant and report any significant changes in the cracking or material movement. Option B. Immediately halt operations in the vicinity of the reported high wall. Conduct a thorough inspection by a designated competent person to assess stability and implement appropriate control measures before resuming operations. Option C. Rely on the operator's experience and the fact that the cracking is minor to assume the high wall is stable and continue normal operations. Option D. Schedule a formal high wall stability assessment for the end of the week, as the current cracking is not severe enough to warrant an immediate shutdown. The correct answer is B. Immediately halt operations in the vicinity of the reported high wall. Conduct a thorough inspection by a designated competent person to assess stability and implement appropriate control measures before resuming operations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a mine safety professional to balance operational efficiency with the paramount need for worker safety, particularly concerning the integrity of high walls in a surface mining operation. The pressure to maintain production schedules can create a conflict with the time and resources needed for thorough safety assessments and corrective actions. Careful judgment is required to identify potential hazards, assess their risk, and implement appropriate controls without unduly hindering necessary mining activities. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment process that prioritizes the identification and mitigation of high wall instability hazards. This approach is professionally sound and ethically mandated by the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA regulations, specifically 30 CFR Part 57, 20,000 series concerning ground support and stability in surface mines. It requires a competent person to inspect high walls for signs of instability, such as cracking, sloughing, or water seepage, and to implement control measures like scaling, berms, or exclusion zones based on the assessed risk. This aligns with the MSHA General Duty Clause, Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977, Section 101A(1), which requires mine operators to provide a safe and healthful working environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate production needs without a comprehensive risk assessment fails to uphold MSHA regulations, ignoring visible signs of high wall distress, such as cracks or minor sloughing, and continuing operations without proper inspection or control measures directly violates the requirement for regular inspections and the prompt correction of hazardous conditions. This approach creates an unacceptable risk of catastrophic failure, endangering miners and equipment. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experience without current, site-specific inspections is also professionally and regulatorily deficient. While experience is valuable, it cannot replace the mandated requirement for diligent, documented inspections of high walls. Each mining shift presents unique conditions, and relying on assumptions rather than direct observation and assessment can lead to overlooking developing hazards. This failure to conduct proper inspections is a direct contravention of MSHA inspection requirements. A third incorrect approach that involves deferring high wall stability assessments to equipment operators without proper training or authority is also unacceptable. While operators are on the front lines, they may not possess the specialized knowledge or regulatory responsibility to conduct a formal risk assessment. The responsibility for identifying and mitigating high wall hazards rests with designated competent persons or supervisors who are trained and empowered to take necessary actions. As stipulated by MSHA regulations concerning competent persons and hazard reporting, the professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a proactive, risk-based approach. This includes 1. Establishing clear inspection protocols for high walls, including frequency and criteria for assessment. 2. Ensuring that designated competent persons are adequately trained and equipped to perform these inspections. 3. Implementing a robust system for reporting and addressing identified hazards promptly, with clear lines of authority for decision-making. 4. Prioritizing safety over production when a significant risk is identified. And 5. Maintaining thorough documentation of all inspections, assessments, and corrective actions. Question 18. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit slight, upward trend in the concentration of a regulated pollutant in the mine's discharge water, with the most recent reading exceeding the permitted limit by 5%. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the certified mine safety professional? Option A. Only document the exceedance in internal records without notifying the operator or MSHA, pending further investigation. Option B. Immediately notify the mine operator and the relevant MSHA district office of the detected exceedance and initiate the development of a corrective action plan. Option C. Immediately halt all mining operations until the cause of the exceedance is fully identified and rectified. Option D. Document the exceedance in internal records and continue monitoring, as the deviation is minor and no visible environmental issues have occurred. The correct answer is B. Immediately notify the mine operator and the relevant MSHA district office of the detected exceedance and initiate the development of a corrective action plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a mine safety professional to interpret environmental monitoring data and determine the appropriate regulatory response without immediate, obvious signs of a catastrophic failure. The challenge lies in the subtle nature of potential environmental noncompliance and the need to act proactively based on trends and deviations, rather than waiting for a significant incident. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with environmental protection obligations and to ensure compliance with the Mine Safety and Health Administration (MSHA) regulations, specifically those pertaining to environmental protection and water management. The correct approach involves immediately notifying the mine operator and the relevant MSHA district office of the detected exceedance and initiating a corrective action plan. This is the most professionally sound and legally compliant response because MSHA regulations, such as those found in 30 CFR Part 40, require prompt reporting of environmental conditions that may pose a hazard or violate permit conditions. Furthermore, proactive notification and planning demonstrate a commitment to environmental stewardship and regulatory adherence, minimizing potential penalties and environmental damage. This approach aligns with the ethical responsibility of a mine safety professional to protect both worker safety and the environment. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the exceedance, because it is only slightly above the permitted limit, and the mine has not experienced any visible environmental issues. This is a regulatory failure because MSHA regulations do not provide a grace period for minor exceedances. Any deviation from permitted limits requires attention and documentation. Ethically, this approach prioritizes expediency over compliance and environmental protection, potentially leading to cumulative environmental harm and increased risk of future, more severe violations. Another incorrect approach would be to only document the exceedance in internal records without notifying the operator or MSHA. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses the mandatory reporting requirements outlined in MSHA regulations. It also represents an ethical lapse by withholding critical information that could impact environmental compliance and potentially lead to further degradation. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately halt all operations until the cause of the exceedance is fully identified and rectified, without first consulting with the mine operator or MSHA. While prompt action is important, an immediate unilateral shutdown without a clear and present danger or explicit regulatory mandate could be an overreaction, potentially causing unnecessary economic disruption and demonstrating a lack of collaborative problem-solving. The professional reasoning process should involve a systematic evaluation of the data, consultation with relevant stakeholders, mine operator, environmental specialists, and a thorough understanding of the specific MSHA regulations applicable to the situation. This includes assessing the severity of the exceedance, its potential environmental impact, and the established procedures for corrective actions and reporting. Question 19. Market research demonstrates that implementing a comprehensive fire prevention and control program can significantly reduce operational risks and associated costs. A mine operator is reviewing their current safety protocols for fire hazards, including spontaneous combustion, diesel equipment fire prevention, and emergency response readiness. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and best practices for mine safety professionals in the United States, as governed by the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA? Option A. Prioritize the immediate upgrade of all ventilation systems to the latest MSHA-approved standards, assuming this will inherently address most fire risks, while deferring routine maintenance on existing fire suppression equipment due to budget constraints. Option B. Implement a new policy requiring all personnel to report any potential fire hazard observed, but without providing specific training on how to identify or mitigate these hazards, and without allocating resources for immediate corrective actions. Option C. Focus solely on ensuring that all portable fire extinguishers are readily accessible and have current inspection tags, as this is the most visible and frequently cited fire safety requirement by MSHA inspectors. Option D. Conduct a thorough hazard assessment to identify specific fire risks, implement targeted preventative measures for spontaneous combustion and diesel equipment, ensure regular inspection and maintenance of all fire detection and suppression systems, and conduct frequent emergency response drills. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the immediate upgrade of all ventilation systems to the latest MSHA-approved standards, assuming this will inherently address most fire risks, while deferring routine maintenance on existing fire suppression equipment due to budget constraints. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a mine operator to balance operational efficiency with the paramount duty of ensuring mine safety, specifically concerning fire prevention in a high-risk environment. The operator must navigate complex regulatory requirements, understand the inherent fire hazards associated with mining operations, and implement robust preventative and responsive measures. Failure to do so can lead to catastrophic consequences, including loss of life, environmental damage, and significant financial penalties. The decision-making process demands a thorough understanding of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA regulations, particularly those pertaining to fire prevention and control. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, proactive strategy that integrates multiple layers of fire safety. This includes a thorough hazard assessment to identify potential ignition sources and combustible materials, the implementation of strict controls for diesel equipment, the establishment of regular inspections and maintenance schedules for fire detection and suppression systems, and the development and regular drilling of emergency response plans. This approach is mandated by MSHA regulations, such as 30 CFR Part 57, Health and Safety Standards Metal and Non-Metal Mines, and 30 CFR Part 75, Health and Safety Standards Coal Mines, which require mine operators to implement programs for fire prevention, detection, suppression, and emergency evacuation. Adherence to these regulations is not merely a legal obligation, but an ethical imperative to protect miners. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings by deferring maintenance on fire suppression systems is professionally unacceptable. This directly violates MSHA requirements for maintaining equipment in safe operating condition and creates an unacceptable risk of fire spreading unchecked, potentially leading to fatalities. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for regulatory compliance and a failure to uphold the ethical responsibility to protect worker safety. Another incorrect approach that neglects regular training and drills for emergency response teams is also professionally unsound. MSHA regulations emphasize the importance of preparedness. An effective emergency response relies on well-trained personnel who can act decisively and efficiently during a fire. Without regular practice, response times will be slower, coordination will be poor, and the effectiveness of firefighting efforts will be severely compromised, increasing the risk to life. A third incorrect approach that fails to implement specific preventative measures for spontaneous combustion in areas with high concentrations of combustible materials, such as coal or certain metal ores, is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. MSHA regulations often have specific requirements for monitoring and controlling spontaneous combustion, which is a significant hazard in many mining environments. Ignoring this specific risk, even if other general fire safety measures are in place, leaves a dangerous gap in the safety program. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough review of all applicable MSHA regulations related to fire prevention and control. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment to identify all potential fire hazards specific to the mine's operations and materials. Based on this assessment, a multifaceted safety program should be developed, incorporating preventative measures, robust detection and suppression systems, and detailed emergency response plans. Regular audits, inspections, and training are crucial to ensure the ongoing effectiveness of the program. Finally, decisions regarding resource allocation for safety must prioritize regulatory compliance and the well-being of miners above short-term economic considerations. Question 20. Compliance review shows that following a significant equipment malfunction leading to a minor injury, the mine safety manager immediately ordered the equipment to be taken out of service and initiated a retraining program for all operators on that specific equipment, without conducting a formal root cause analysis or detailed incident investigation, which approach best aligns with regulatory requirements and best practices for accident investigation and prevention. Option A. Focus on identifying the individual operator most directly involved in the malfunction and implement disciplinary actions to prevent future occurrences. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis, including evidence gathering, interviews, and data analysis, to identify all contributing factors, and then develop targeted corrective actions based on the findings, followed by appropriate reporting. Option C. Implement immediate operational changes and retraining based on the perceived cause, and document these actions as sufficient corrective measures to satisfy reporting requirements. Option D. Issue a general safety bulletin to all mine personnel about the dangers of equipment malfunction and rely on their inherent safety awareness to prevent future incidents. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis, including evidence gathering, interviews, and data analysis, to identify all contributing factors, and then develop targeted corrective actions based on the findings, followed by appropriate reporting. Explanation. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires the mine safety professional to balance immediate corrective actions with a thorough, systematic investigation to prevent recurrence. The challenge lies in avoiding premature conclusions while ensuring that immediate safety concerns are addressed and that the investigation process itself adheres to regulatory requirements and best practices for root cause analysis. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the investigation is comprehensive, unbiased, and leads to effective, sustainable corrective actions, rather than superficial fixes. The correct approach involves a systematic, multifaceted investigation that prioritizes identifying the root cause of the accident. This begins with securing the accident scene, preserving evidence, and conducting thorough interviews with all relevant personnel. The focus then shifts to employing established root cause analysis techniques, such as the 5 whys, or fault tree analysis, to move beyond immediate causes to underlying systemic issues. Data analysis of incident trends and contributing factors is crucial for understanding the broader context. Finally, developing and implementing specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART corrective actions, followed by diligent follow-up and reporting, are essential for demonstrating compliance and preventing future incidents. This aligns with the principles of MSHA accident investigation regulations, which mandate reporting and investigation to identify causes and prevent recurrence, emphasizing a proactive safety culture. An incorrect approach would be to implement immediate, superficial corrective actions without a thorough investigation into the root cause. This fails to address the underlying systemic issues that led to the accident, making recurrence highly probable. It also violates the spirit and letter of MSHA regulations, which require a comprehensive investigation to determine causes and prevent future accidents, not just to address the immediate symptom. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on individual blame without exploring contributing factors and systemic deficiencies. This not only creates a climate of fear and discourages reporting, but also fails to identify and rectify organizational or procedural failures that may have played a significant role. MSHA regulations emphasize identifying causes, which often extend beyond individual actions to include training, supervision, equipment maintenance, and operational procedures. A third incorrect approach is to delay or inadequately document the investigation process and findings. This hinders learning, prevents effective communication of lessons learned, and can lead to noncompliance with reporting requirements. Thorough documentation is critical for accountability, future reference, and demonstrating due diligence in safety management. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Immediate hazard control. Ensure the safety of personnel and the mine environment. 2. Preservation of evidence. Secure the accident scene and collect all relevant physical and testimonial evidence. 3. Systematic investigation. Employ established techniques to identify immediate causes, contributing factors, and root causes. 4. Data analysis. Review historical data and trends to identify patterns and systemic issues. 5. Corrective action development. Design specific, actionable, and sustainable corrective measures. 6. Implementation and follow-up. Ensure corrective actions are implemented effectively and their effectiveness is monitored. 7. Reporting and communication. Document findings and communicate lessons learned to all relevant stakeholders. This structured approach ensures that investigations are thorough, compliant, and contribute to a continuously improving safety culture.